somebody who treats women like that, who manipulates them and exploits them, is not a role model for men and is certainly not a role model for conservatives who claim to stand for family values.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Base Politics Podcast. I'm Hannah Cox with Brad Polumbo. This week, Tucker Carlson attempts to rehab Andrew Tate, Lina Khan of the FTC gets grilled by Congress, and so much more. Let's jump in. Well, we've got some big topics to cover this week. We missed a huge interview that came out over the time we were in Memphis at Freedom Fest, but we both have suffered through it and caught up. There is a over 2-hour interview that Tucker Carlson just linked with Andrew Tate. And guys, we've covered Andrew Tate on this show before. He is a mega influencer grifter. He is in the red-pilled men's rights kind of space, and he is just
male.
I'm not giving him that. That guy, I could beat that guy arm wrestling.
Self-described alpha male.
Yeah, and as is true with anybody who is a self-described alpha male, there's nothing alpha about this twerp. He is just a sniveling weirdo, but he's got an audience, and he has been facing charges in Romania for almost a year now. It's been a while that this has been ongoing. He's been under house arrest, I think, along with his brother. We covered this a long time ago, guys. I can't remember the exact timeline. But anyways, all that to say, Tucker platformed him over the past week. And I am not one of these people that says you shouldn't platform people you disagree with, or even people who have awful things to say. I think there is value at times in confronting people, in exposing them, in arguing and debating them. But that's not what Tucker did in this interview. I told you in watching it, I felt like I watched a 2-hour blowjob session between Tucker Carlson and Andrew Tate. He was like a little fanboy. It was so weird to watch. He did nothing to push back on the many lies that Andrew Tate told throughout the course of his interview. He was laughing alongside him as they joked about things like sex trafficking and coercion. I mean, the whole thing was like seedy. Yeah. I feel like I needed to take a bath afterwards.
It was a tough watch. I will say that Tucker has the ability to be a fantastic interviewer and a very effective interviewer. I mean, just look at how he treated Mike Pence the other day. It went viral, him grilling Mike Pence over Ukraine. But he just decided to go fangirl and just let Andrew Tate say all sorts of things that aren't true. So as you mentioned, Andrew Tate is this mega influencer, social media star, TikTok, YouTube, everything. He's just one of the most famous people on the internet. So even if you haven't heard of him, your Gen Z or millennial kids or nephews or whatever absolutely have. I think he's a very pernicious influence, but he stands accused of sex trafficking and sexual assault in Romania, where he has chosen to live. And he also has faced accusations in the past in the UK of sexual assault and physical violence, including ones that are corroborated by contemporaneous text and even voice notes, where he admits to some of it, although not fully admitting to all the crimes. But it's pretty damning stuff. Now, this case in Romania is obviously hard for us to evaluate. We don't speak Romanian. We don't know much about the Romanian criminal justice system. However, the way that Tucker allowed Andrew to spin the case, where he's accused of sex trafficking and of rape, was disappointing, because he didn't point out that this just simply wasn't true. Take a listen to this first extended clip.
How do you force someone to do TikTok videos?
I guess the prosecutor is going to have to explain that, isn't he? It's a very interesting scenario I'm in, and I'm inside of Romania, so I have to show a degree of respect to the Romanian judicial system, and I have to show a degree of respect to the situation I'm in. But the overall charge is that there's an organized criminal group. There's a group of us. I'm the head of it. My brother is below me. And we use the lover boy method to convince women to do TikTok videos to make money so that we can steal the TikTok money.
So there's no, just to be clear, you are not accused of pandering, of pimping, of forcing women to have sex with anybody.
No, not forcing them to have sex, not restraining their movement, not stopping them from living a full life, but the fact that we are somehow convincing them to have TikTok. Very interesting.
But force, what does that consist of? Forcing someone to do something, are they accusing you of using violence or?
No, they're accusing me, and this is the thing, they're accusing me of using the lover boy method, coercing them by being nice.
So, Brad, I know we have some actual data to get in here that is going to totally debunk this. And I, again, just think it's completely irresponsible of Tucker to have not done his job as a journalist if he's going to have an interview with this person, to have the facts at his disposal and to actually ask him meaningful, hard-hitting questions about what the allegations actually entail. One thing that makes me irate about this, though, immediately off the cuff, even before we get into the fact that I think it's full of lies, is how they're joking about the Loverboy method, which is nothing to joke about. The
Actually
Loverboy
quite
method
serious.
is
It's a
not
real thing.
it's not being nice. It is coercing somebody and tricking them into thinking that you were in a loving, committed relationship with them, and then convincing them to start doing things for sexual gratification of you or others, sometimes for money involved, that they would not normally be doing, except they're trying to please you and stay in the context of this relationship. It is a sinister, disgusting technique to use. It is abusive, and the lightness with which that is discussed there is so off-putting and horrible, and I just, turns my stomach.
Yeah, and Andrew Tate's actually on the record in the past admitting that he used in the past the Loverboy method. Take a listen to this clip.
I was all about trying to get paid. Like I used sex as a tool to make women love me so they'd obey me and live in my house and make me money. That's what I wanted. So I was a pimp in that sense. Like, I was not trying to have sex with women. I was trying to get women to obey me. And I realized that's easier if they like to have sex with me. If they don't like having sex with me, it's pretty hard to make them listen to me.
So he's openly bragged about using the Loverboy method. And now that was in reference to a webcam business he had years ago, those old clips. And the thing he's accused of now is a separate instance. So it's not literally the same thing, but it's not such a stretch to believe that he used this method when he's on the record so many times in the past talking about how he historically used that method.
Right. And even in the interview with Tucker says, so you're not a pimp. You're not, yes, you are. You are a pimp. You have been trying to convince women to submit to you and sleep with people and sleep with you, perhaps for money. I don't know who all they were sleeping with in this scenario, but clearly he's on camera admitting that he was pimping women out for money. I don't understand, the amount of people who literally will tell you this is a conspiracy theory. This is the New World Order trying to come after him because he's so masculine. He's going to wake up all these other masculine men and then they can't control us because we'll all just be so masculine. Get the F out of here. It is so easy to find many, many instances of him making this exact same kind of comment on camera. He's a moron. And if you don't know that, I think you are too, because it's not hard to find this. It's all over the internet, him saying these kinds of things.
Well, and I'll just say this, set the law aside for a moment. Or is he guilty? Is he not guilty? Somebody who treats women like that, who manipulates them and exploits them, is not a role model for men and is certainly not a role model for conservatives who claim to stand for family values.
Yeah, the same people who run around screaming groomer at anybody who's in the LGBT community, the same people who are constantly obsessing over human trafficking, that are obsessed with promiscuity, that are saying we should go back to these trad relationships, women should all be virgins, men need to be the protectors of their households, in the same breath turn around and support this kind of creep online. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I think this movement has become completely unmoored from any actual values, any substance, any principles whatsoever, and they are getting grifted upon hard, and they look like fools because nobody takes you seriously. Anybody who's claiming to be a conservative and stand for things like individual liberty could not support this kind of rhetoric. Anybody who says they're pro-life could not support somebody bragging about exploiting women on camera. Anybody who says they are Christian should be condemning this unilaterally. And I'm actually madder at the conservatives who've fallen into his fan base than I am even him. Get your acts together.
I also want to point out, as a matter of journalistic integrity, he says, they're not even accusing me of violence. And Tucker goes, oh, really? He should know that that's actually not true. So just going to the indictment from Romania, and this is a Google translated version, so don't interpret it word for word, but it says very specifically, through the indictment dated 15/06/2023, which is in our writing would be June 15th of 2023, the government ordered that the 4 defendants be sent to court under house arrest, 2 people with dual citizenship, British and American, and 2 Romanian citizens for committing the crimes of constituting an organized criminal group, human trafficking in a continuous form, and continued rape, 2 material acts. as well as a variety of other charges, and instigation to hit or other violence and hitting or other violence. Now, this also says that it basically describes the lover boy method. However, it also says they were later transported and housed in buildings in Ilvav County where, by exercising acts of physical violence and mental coercion, they were sexually exploited by group members. Look, let me say this. We don't know if that's true. It's an allegation in an indictment. But when Andrew Tate says that he's not even accused of violence, that's not true. That is factually incorrect. And that's something Tucker should have pointed out if he was even going to do a bare minimum due diligence in this interview. And he simply didn't. It turned into a 2-hour love fest. And I am a huge believer that sunlight is the best disinfectant. I don't believe in no platforming people. However, when you're going to have such a popular figure with such a shady past and things going on, you've got to call it out. You've got to have push and pull. You can't just roll over and give them an open mic for 2.5 hours where you're nodding along about how amazing they are.
I mean, what Tucker basically did was give him a much larger platform to reach an audience he wouldn't usually be in front of in order to lie and do damage control on his image. And to me, that is my big problem with Tucker, right? It's not that he interviewed him, that's fine. It's that he didn't do the basic bare minimum as a quote journalist. It's becoming really easy to see why Fox News wanted to disenfranchise from this person because he's kind of a live wire. Like, this is really just, it's not even following basic journalism ethics of how you approach interviews. And I can't understand the reasoning for that unless you are actually in this guy's fan base and you're trying to basically help fix his image, try to, sort over everything he's done wrong. And I felt like the entire time watching this, Tucker kind of came about this with this attitude that I think is pretty prevalent around the movement that Andrew Tate has built up around himself, that like women are just lying about men, that powers that be lie about men, that when you see accusations against them, it's all made up, it's fabricated, men are just being abused by society. And like, this is why I've said for some time, the Tates and everybody else sort of in their like manosphere, they have this real message of victimhood, of like, you as a man are a victim, everybody's after you, and you've been victimized by society, and you've been victimized by women not wanting to sleep with you. And that is really what they have tapped into, is this like pervasive sense amongst men in our society that they're victims. And I just find that really unattractive. I think we can have a conversation about there being some things that are stacked against men in our society, certainly when you get into like the custody system and the divorce system and things of that nature. I also think society-wise, men are not thriving. I've talked about that extensively with the loneliness epidemic, the lack of strong community ties around many men, the likelihood that they're more likely to commit suicide because they don't get as much mental health care. They die younger because they're not taking as good of care of themselves oftentimes. The list goes on. Those are things that are fair to talk about, but I think they should be talked about in a way that is empowering to men, that encourages them to pull themselves up by their bootstraps to actually embrace true masculinity, which is not this like victimhood snowflake whining on the internet mentality. And I feel like Tucker's just so much in that camp that he identifies with Andrew Tate, and it's sort of a like, anybody, could come for me and accuse me too, and therefore like I'm with you because these are just wild allegations. No, these are credible allegations. We've said over and over, he, like anybody else, deserves his day in court. We believe in due process. I believe in the rule of law. I don't believe in convicting people in the court of public opinion, but these are credible accusations. They are not fluffy. They are not made up. They are not without accusers. So I cannot stand the approach that Tucker took to this. And I think it's going to do a lot of damage in convincing conservatives out there, especially conservative men, that this is part of a larger overarching agenda to try to target men, that Andrew Tate represents them, right? That this could happen.
I can see why, they'd look at something like the treatment of Brett Kavanaugh, and they'd be very legitimate concerns about due process and the weaponization of accusations. But that doesn't mean that sometimes they're not legitimate, and sometimes they are credible. And I will say, on the due process element, you and I both believe in innocent until proven guilty, and Tate has some valid complaints about how, if we take his version of events at face value, he's been treated by the Romanian criminal justice system. Let's roll this clip.
What are the penalties?
They're extremely severe, 5 to 10 years in jail. And I've already served, coming up now, 7 months in a form of jail. They can only hold
you are essentially incarcerated right now.
Absolutely, I'm on house arrest, and that counts as jail. You can only be held 6 months without charge. I was initially picked up, thrown in a cell, without charge. And I think the intention of the entire investigation at that point was to find the crime because they had very, very weak evidence. They contacted 2,000 people who know me or knew me. They tried very hard to convince some female somewhere to come forward and say something bad about me. The media machine, which works hands in hands with the justice machine, as you know very well, did exactly that. In fact, they offered bribes effectively. They'd call up ex-girlfriends and say, if you have anything bad to say about Andrew, we can pay you $50,000 for the story. And they tried very hard. They didn't find any evidence of anything. They then released me on house arrest, and then 2 days before the legal limit in which they had to drop everything, they charged me with whatever they had from the beginning, which is very little. And now we have to wait for the Romanian judicial system to analyze the file and, God willing, throw it away.
So, Hannah, we're taking that at face value. Obviously, there's issues if he's held without charges. That's wrong. But let me play another clip for you where Andrew Tate describes why he chose to live in Romania, of all places.
And I like living in countries where, one, there's some kind of moral fiber beyond the dollar, and two, I like living in countries where corruption is accessible for everybody. I find it offensive that a police officer in England will stop me for speeding and then refuse to take a bribe and pretend that... No, but I'll tell you why. Because he'll sit there and go, no, this is the law and order, and pretend that the law means something and fuck me over. But if you're a billionaire or if you're Boris Johnson, you can go to Epstein's Island, you can fucking throw parties during COVID, you can do whatever the fuck you want, right? So the whole idea of law and order is a lie. The whole idea of it's bullshit. It's just about if you're high enough, you can throw it all away. I'd rather be in a society where if I'm in Prague and they stop me for speeding and they say, bro, you were speeding. Oh, here's $50. All right, cool. Bye. If corruption exists, which it does, let us all play. Why do only they get to play and I don't get to play? So you live in England and they're going to come around and spout law and order at you all day long, but the elites, they ignore all law and order. It's always been bullshit. It's always been lies. So they're going to sit here and lock you in your house or force you to wear a mask while they get to do whatever the fuck they want. And I don't like being anyone's peon or anyone's sheep. So I like living in a society where my money and my influence and my power means I'm not below or beholden to any of these bullshit laws.
So he basically said there that he chose Romania because he likes to live in a society that's corrupt, where he's not beholden to the laws. And yet now here he is complaining about how unfair the justice system is in Romania. I guess I just don't have that much sympathy for him then.
Yeah, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. I mean, I think it's not lost on me that this type likes to go live in places that are certainly not bastions of human rights, right? These are not places that are known for upholding the same standards of ethics that the West has. And the West certainly has many, many issues within our criminal justice system. To be quite frank, you could probably find a person in every state that's had the same kind of ordeal he's had with not being charged, being held without charges, being held without bail, on and on the list goes. Justice systems are corrupt. That's why they need to be extremely limited and have a lot of accountability and transparency. And I haven't really seen anybody get it right yet in the modern world. But in the U.S., you do have some recourse. You know, if you are being mistreated by the criminal justice system, which you very well could be, you can at least hire attorneys. There are pro bono groups that would come to your defense. You have the media that you could use to expose them. There are still some tools you could use to try to push back. I doubt Romania has that kind of infrastructure, but he clearly wanted to live in a place that was corrupt and that didn't have a rule of law, and where he was able to get away with more things. I mean, he has said this over and over on camera that he recognized he would be able to get away with more in Romania. And I think that is a very damning look for him when it comes to these charges as a whole. So I don't really have a lot of sympathy for him. I also don't really trust him. So it's, it's hard to say, like, is this what's happening in Romania? Is it not? Who knows?
But even if we give him the benefit of the doubt, and it's true, it doesn't mean he's innocent, and it's hypocritical because he chose it for the corruption. So, look,
and with Tucker being there, it would have been nice for him to do some actual journalism and look into that, talk to Romanian officials, do some digging. I don't understand what the point of this interview was.
What I would have done is play clips of Tucker, of Andrew Tate to Andrew Tate. So I would have said, oh, I'm sorry to hear about your experiences in the Romanian criminal justice system. Let's see if you've changed your view from this that you said. And then on my monitor, play that clip we showed you. Like, all right, which was right? I mean, are you pro-corruption or anti-corruption? Or I would have said, so did you do the Loverboy method? And he said, no, it's not real. That's just being nice. I would play the clips of him explicitly talking. And we only played a short one. There's minutes where he uses the specific term, Loverboy method, that he's teaching men to do. So he is clearly hypocritical. He's contradicted himself too many times to count, but that wasn't pointed out. And for a long time, this guy was tolerated on the right or ignored while he was mega viral and famous. Just prominent trad influencers and commentators didn't call him out. And now some have started to. Ben Shapiro, to his credit, has actually been for some time pushing back on Andrew Tate. And now we have folks like Liz Wheeler, who is a very socially conservative commentator, tweeted, Andrew Tate is evil. He's an antichrist figure. He diagnoses a cultural ill accurately, that our society vilifies men. Then for an antidote, he prescribes poison, materialism, pornography, the exploitation of women, the worship of self. Young men should reject him. Allie Beth Stuckey, a socially conservative Blaze TV host who I've gone back and forth with, I've debated. She says, disturbing how many in the OK groomer, predators should get the death penalty, ban porn, the media sides with sex traffickers crowd somehow seem to view Andrew Tate, a literal groomer, with such nuanced and complex respect. I want to give them both credit. This is in both cases, I think they're right. I don't share all their values or everything, so some of the statements here or there, maybe I don't fully agree with, but like, I'm glad they're speaking out and they've got the gist here right. However, what's depressing is that in the replies under their tweets, you will just see mobs of men defending them. And so it's depressing. I don't know how much more, but I feel like people on the right have an obligation to speak out against this man. Yet if you do, he says that you are just part of the Matrix or the deep state to get him. Let's roll this clip from his response video to conservatives turning against him.
Anybody who puts together any edit of any video that is older than 2021 doesn't understand, has nothing at all to do with the criminal case. And anybody now on the right who's attacking me in perfect sync overnight with all these other accounts is simply a Matrix agent which has been activated by the people in charge who understand that their primary weapon, the MSM, is no longer working. It's bouncing off of me because people love truth and they love honesty.
Yeah, look, I'm not a part of any Matrix. There's no conspiracy to take him out. Nobody sent me the talking points. I just look at this guy who's a literal pornographer who has bragged about how he mistreats women, who is openly misogynistic, and then has these criminal charges against him that I don't know are true, but certainly are in character with the things he said in the past. And I just think this is not somebody who should be a model, a role model, or an influence on any young man, on conservative young men, on anybody with family values or just decent norms or respect. And so I'm glad people are speaking out against him. I know we'll get some hate for doing so, but I just think it's important.
Yeah, I mean, his message is one of masochism and misogyny. You and I have been speaking out about it for a long time, long before most conservatives started speaking out. We have taken some heat for it, and we don't care, because I think it is incumbent on anybody who is trying to advance things in society and politically to condemn this kind of rhetoric. I think Andrew Tate's audience and his message is akin to a hate group against women. I think women need to be really careful. And if you start dating a man, search through his likes on Twitter. Look and see if he's liking this kind of content. I mean, I'm dead ass serious. Like, people need to avoid people who are in this kind of mentality. I think that he should be ostracized from society. I think that there needs to be tremendous pushback from both men and women. You know, I'd like to see more men rising up. I have seen a lot of conservative women speaking out against this following the interview with Tucker Carlson. I am pleased to see that, but we need so much more. And I think that we need to find better role models to direct young men to and actually give them the tools they need to fix themselves and fix their lives. So I think everybody should do their job in advocating against this guy and anybody who's saying things like him. So we'll leave it there.
Hey guys, Brad here. I just want to make sure you're staying in the loop on all things space politics. We've also got 2 new shows you should check out. One is my new show, Damage Control, where I'm teaming up with right-of-center LGBT guests to restore sanity on these increasingly unhinged issues. Then there's Hannah's show, Propaganda, where she's reacting to videos of police brutality and exposing the systemic flaws in the U.S. criminal justice system. Check these all out on our individual Facebook and YouTube pages. And remember, Base Politics is a nonprofit organization, so you can help us move the culture through content by going to base-politics.com and donating today.
We have to move on to a wonkier subject, but one that I am very interested in. Guys, I often help you understand why you should be a wonk nerd like me, and you've come along with me on a few issues like certificate of need and things that I know were not really in the public in the past. I need you to pay attention to what's happening at the FTC. I know that the Federal Trade Commission is not a sexy agency. It's not one that most people usually pay that much attention to. You probably have no idea what it does, but it is tremendously powerful. This is a giant bureaucracy in DC. It has so much sway over the free market, over the economy, over private businesses. And up until very recently, it has traditionally been a pretty bipartisan agency. It has existed to allegedly protect capitalism, right? It wants to make sure that there is competition in the market, that there aren't monopolies, that businesses are treating consumers ethically, that people aren't getting railroaded by unfair business practices, things of that sort. I would argue that the FTC is probably not even needed in the first place, because one true threat to capitalism is the government itself. So it's sort of a irony that it exists to protect capitalism. But that being said, it was not ever as big of a problem in our lifetimes as it has become under the current chair, who is named Lina Khan. She's one of the youngest bureaucrats in power. And if you're not familiar with her, I need to catch you up to speed. She just got absolutely grilled by Congress last week. I was giddy. When I tell you I had my Laffy Taffy, I was in my Uber to the airport, and I was like live tweeting it. I was having a great time. I want to get it in front of you guys because actually some of the things they were questioning her about are really, really important. This woman is trying to use the FTC and the power of antitrust to remake the economy. And when I tell you she is an avowed socialist, I am not exaggerating. This woman hates capitalism, and she's becoming a giant problem. So basically, she was nominated by President Joe Biden in 2021. She was confirmed by the Senate, including some Republicans, which I have a bone to pick about. And she was sworn in June 15th, 2021. So she's been in power like 2 years. Prior to her current appointment at FTC, Khan was an associate professor at Columbia Law School, where she spent a lot of time opining against capitalism. Khan spent much of her early career researching and writing on market consolidation at think tanks that included the New American Foundation and the Open Markets Institute. And during her tenure at Columbia Law School, she wrote on antitrust topics, and that became a big part of the national conversation. This is kind of how she rose to prominence. She published something in 2017 called Amazon's Antitrust Paradox. And that's when she was actually a law student at Yale, but it blew up while she was at Columbia Law School. And it won all kinds of awards, got national acclaim. And it basically is a challenge to the concept that antitrust law should focus on consumer welfare or companies' ability to offer goods at competitive prices. She thinks that that is a bad thing. And this is something that has been long entrenched in our legal system and in our the way we evaluate antitrust since like the 1980s. There was a conservative scholar named Robert Bork, and he basically said that in order for the government to have the power to use antitrust against a business, there should be a standard, right? They shouldn't be able to come in and basically bully companies and say, you regulate like this or you hire like this, and if you don't do it, then we're going to antitrust you. No, there needs to be some method by which they're allowed to bring these kinds of lawsuits. They're very expensive and costly to businesses. And so he developed something called the Consumer Welfare Standard that basically says the company has to be a monopoly, which is pretty rare. There's not that many monopolies out there. The company also has to have used its monopoly power, and it has to have used this monopoly power in a way that actually harms consumers, right? That's
the most important part, because sometimes monopolies or heavy market concentration emerge as a result for a reason. Like there's something called a natural monopoly, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's harming consumers, which is the only time a monopoly is bad is if it's exploiting that power to harm consumers. But people like Lina Khan just want to see any market concentration anywhere as inherently bad and break it up, regardless of whether consumers are being hurt.
She just hates corporations. She hates big business, and she doesn't care. And oftentimes, if you have a large corporation like Google or Amazon, it's because consumers are choosing to use them because they're offering a really good product at a great price. That is not indicative of a company being a problem in the market just because it's big. But she wants to get rid of all of that. She wants to flip it on its head. And she has long argued in her work that antitrust is the vehicle to do that. And so she has become one of the most, and this is not just me saying this, many are recognizing her as like one of the most extreme members of the Biden administration. In her infamous Yale Review article, she said that the FTC, that she critiqued Amazon in it, and she said that the retailer keeps prices too low. And she wanted to use the FTC to come in and fix that. So she's been targeting Amazon for some time. She's been targeting Twitter. And another piece Khan published with the anti-capitalist outlet Law and Political Economy Project, she argues that antitrust must be reconfigured towards the redistribution of economic and political power and away from concerns regarding price. That's a Marxist publication that she has a long tie to, by the way. And so essentially she's been arguing this for a while. She wants to use antitrust as the primary mode to bring about a socialist economy in America. She's trying to use it as a weapon against capitalism. And since she took over the FTC 2 years ago, everything has gone haywire. Morale's at an all-time low. Polling of the staff is like, we do not trust our leaders. All Republicans all Republicans have literally fled the premises and resigned. But there are no more Republicans left in power there. Noah Phillips resigned in October, and his fellow Republican Christine Wilson left in March after accusing Khan of abuse of power and publicly railing against her. So the agency is in chaos, and in the midst of all that, she is also 0 and 4 in merger trials. So she has been bringing antitrust lawsuits against various companies, which again cost taxpayers millions of dollars, cost the companies millions of dollars. And she is losing over and over and over in court because she has no business to be bringing these lawsuits. They are frivolous and they have no actual harm to consumers to be seen, but she is trying to, again, change legal precedent and weaponize the FTC against companies. So this is one of many reasons she got brought before Congress last week, and Republicans let her have it. I want to start with a clip from Kevin Kiley, who is a representative out of California. I have to be honest, I don't know a ton about Kevin Kiley's background, but he is increasingly becoming one of my favorite representatives to seat grill somebody because he's who you want on your bench. So let's roll this clip of him questioning her.
You're 0 for 4 in merger trials. And so when I was trying to figure out what's going on here, I found maybe a clue in an article from the New York Times, December 7th, 2022, which reported comments you made at a conference where you said this. You said, if there's a law violation and agencies think that current law might make it difficult to reach, there's a huge benefit to still trying. She added that any courtroom losses would signal to Congress that lawmakers need to update antitrust laws to better suit the modern economy. I'm certainly not somebody who thinks that success is marked by a 100% court record, you said. So this raises the question, Chair Khan, are you losing on purpose?
Congressman, the key clause in the quote you mentioned was if there is a law violation. We only bring cases when the facts before us lead us to believe that there is a law violation under the existing laws. On the merger front, there are a whole set of cases where we've won, including in instances where the parties abandoned and walked away after
Okay, you're 0 for 4 in merger trials. So what did you mean when you said that any courtroom losses would signal to Congress that lawmakers need to update the antitrust laws? What does that mean?
So there is an institutional dialogue, right, between enforcers, between Congress, between the courts. There's a century worth of antitrust back and forth between the agencies, between Congress. This very committee in the 1950s determined that the agencies were not bringing the types of cases that Congress was worried about in terms of monopoly power.
Okay, but you're actually bringing the cases. You're losing because you don't have the authority that you want from Congress. So this is how you think you're going to persuade Congress to give you more authority, is by exceeding the authority that you now have?
Congressman, again, we only bring lawsuits where we believe there is a law violation, given the facts and the law at hand. We fight hard when we believe that there is a law violation, and unfortunately, things don't always go our way. But we make determinations.
But are you bringing cases that you expect to lose?
Could you repeat?
Are you bringing cases that you expect to lose?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Well, your track record seems to suggest otherwise.
Yeah, so it sure sounds to me like she's wasting tons of taxpayer money on lawsuits to harass big companies that she knows she has no chance of winning. So why? And she claims otherwise, but it just seems pretty clear.
She's full of it, right? I mean, she has unilaterally lost. She is getting her butt handed to her, and she wants to come in and act like, oopsie, we thought there really was a law violation. No, you didn't. You were trying to lose. She is well documented that she and people in her camp think that there is value in bringing antitrust lawsuits and losing them because, again, she wants to use it as a signal to Congress to update the antitrust laws and get rid of the consumer welfare standard on that side. If she can't win in court, she's trying to use the litigation process to pressure the legislative process. And that's actually a very common strategy that's used on any number of issues. But you have a lot of lawmakers who are playing right into this, right? And they're on the left and the right. When you see people like Josh Hawley running around wanting to change antitrust laws, signing on to bills with people like Amy Klobuchar, what they are trying to do is hand this woman specifically a ton more power over the free market. It makes absolutely no sense.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong, Josh Hawley? I mean, it's just so moronic. I've often said, like, I don't think Josh Hawley's stupid, but he sure thinks you are, because this is not capitalism. This is not, anybody who's a supporter of free market capitalism would be trying everything they can do to limit the FTC's budget right now and to protect the free market from this woman who is using her power in a way that's actually very vindictive against companies that she dislikes. And they actually got into that even more. We don't have time to get into it totally today, but in the hearing, they really got into how she's, been very punitive and gone after companies that she specifically dislikes, like Twitter, because of their political leanings. And so if you want to give this woman more power and the FTC more power, that's more of what you're going to get. She just lost another recent case that we did cover at Base Politics. I don't think we've discussed it on the show yet, but she went after Microsoft very recently. It was the FTC versus Microsoft and Activision Blizzard. And the FTC was arguing that Microsoft should not be able to acquire Activision Blizzard because it would reduce competition in the cloud-based gaming industry. Activision's top game is Call of Duty, which they license and make available on all gaming platforms, not just their own popular console, Xbox. But for whatever reason, Khan and her team seem to be very specifically concerned with another company's ability to access that game, which was Sony. And Stephen Kent, who is our friend at the Consumer Choice Center, he wrote for The Hill that Microsoft offered a number of long-term licensing deals during the process to display good faith and disinterest in cutting off Sony from its major titles. They said it's bad business for both parties. At the onset of the hearing, it was revealed via internal emails from within Sony, though, that the leader in video game consoles and chief advocate of the FTC's crusade against Microsoft didn't actually care that much about accessing Call of Duty. He actually wrote, this is the CEO, Jim Ryan of Sony, he actually said, I don't want a new Call of Duty deal, I just want to block your merger. And so this was a really weird case where...
hang on, let me make sure I have this story right. So Microsoft wants to acquire Activision Blizzard, and Activision Blizzard owns Call of Duty, which is a super popular video game on Microsoft, but also on the other platforms. Now, the FTC is supposedly concerned that Microsoft, if it acquires Activision Blizzard, will only allow Call of Duty on Xbox, not on PlayStation or the other consoles, to give itself a competitive advantage. But they've already made a number of deals to Sony and other places saying that they will, and it would be bad business. And then actually turns out they don't actually care about Call of Duty. They just want to block the merger.
Sony did, right? So it appeared for all intents and purposes that the FTC was acting like the guard dog of Sony and going after another company, a competitor of Sony's, to try to block its growth, which is, again, just extremely corrupt, completely anti-capitalist. And there was no reason for them to allege in court that this was going to be a problem. They have always licensed Call of Duty. They were willing to set contracts and licensing agreements for like 10 years out. That wasn't good enough. So Lina Khan and the FTC spent millions of your tax dollars to pursue this bogus lawsuit and made Microsoft spend millions of dollars defending itself in court. So that's a huge waste just economically. And they lost. They lost resoundingly on this case. She's already tried to appeal it. I think she's going to lose again because contrary to what she said to Congress, there is no rule being broken. There is no consumer being harmed here. So anyways, this is one of the many things that she was asked about before Congress this week. I want to roll this clip.
Let's look more closely at the Activision decision, though. The court first noted that in an attempt to lower your burden, you essentially made up case law. You couldn't find anything actually that's the courts have provided in terms of precedents. You cited to your own FTC decision as precedent. But irrespective of the legal standard, the court, you probably wouldn't have won under any standard because the court said this, that the FTC has not raised serious questions regarding whether the proposed merger is likely to substantially lessen competition. Not raised serious questions. The court also rejected not only rejected your assertion of a likely anti-competitive effect, but found just the opposite, that the record evidence points to more consumer access. So why should Americans have faith in your judgment when this Biden-appointed judge says you are so far off the mark?
Congressman, this matter is still pending before the FTC in administrative adjudication, so I'm just going to be limited in what I can say about the merits. Our complaint lays out the staff's view of what this merger would result in and why that would be a law violation.
But the judge roundly rejected it and said there weren't even serious questions, and now having lost, you're spending even more taxpayer money on an appeal that you're even less likely to win because the appeals court is going to defer to the trial court's findings of fact in this very fact-intensive matter. So why are you spending even more taxpayer resources pursuing this appeal?
So I can say, again, this was a staff recommendation. I can say it a general matter. Staff always looks closely at an opinion and looks at whether there are certain errors in law that they believe are worth appealing on. Those are, in general, the types of determinations that go into whether the FTC ends up appealing.
So I love that he points out that in order to try to bring this whole case, she cited herself and her own opinion at the FTC. That's just actually very funny. But I want to be clear, she hurried up and filed an appeal on this case, not because there's any shot in hell she's going to win, but because she didn't want to have to answer questions about it before Congress. And because it's still tied up in legal matters, she's able to give the kind of excuse she just gave to him.
Yeah, I'm going to start doing that next time I'm writing for an outlet and they ask me for a source. I'll just send them a tweet where I tweeted the same thing. And that's my precedent. That's my source. Yeah. Of course, the FTC has the power to do this. We just did it earlier. Is essentially what I'm getting of her argument. But what I found really funny in this hearing, Hannah, was when one of the Democratic members essentially suggested that people are only criticizing her because they're all racist and she's a woman of color. Let's roll this last clip.
And I want to commend my colleagues on the other side of the aisle in the 118th Congress in diversifying the membership on their side of the aisle. But frankly, we haven't done enough. They have not done enough. They can't do enough at this point. And it reflects in the treatment that a witness such as yourself, Chair Khan, receives from this committee. When a witness comes in, sitting solo at that table in front of all of these interrogators, it's a daunting look. The American people can see it, and when we treat a witness who looks like you with the politics of personal destruction, and when we only attack witnesses who look like you with allegations of incompetence and a lack of ability to lead their agency, it's indicative of the need for this committee to reflect what the American people look like. And I want to appreciate you today for withstanding what you have had to endure thus far, and we've only begun.
So, Hannah, she's actually just stunning and brave, and the mean Republicans are all just racist. It's not because she's anti-capitalist. It's not because she keeps losing cases and harassing companies. It's not because she's wasting millions of dollars. It's just the mean, bad Republicans bullying a woman of color. That is so cringe and so baseless, but also I find it kind of condescending. Like, I would think it's a sign of respect to grill a woman of color appointee the same way you'd grill anyone else. They grill Fauci, and he's a white dude. Like, what do they expect? Kid gloves? Because that's what seems like the racist suggestion to me.
Well, actually, aside from the racism comment, though, this is exactly how you saw Democrats behave during hearings where Fauci was pushed to admit the truth on things, where they get up and they'd be like, how dare you be undermined? How dare you be disrespected? You're such a brave, once-in-a-lifetime leader. This is just so unfair to you. How dare anybody try to hold you accountable as one of the most powerful people in the country? Like, it's so weird. Like, the whole idea that somebody who is running one of the largest agencies in this country, who has hundreds of millions of tax dollars at her disposal, should not be made to answer for how she's using them, should not be held accountable for the decisions she's making, should not be called out for her unilateral failure over the past 2 years. I mean, even if you like Lina Khan, which would make you just completely off the tracks, but let's say you do, she's still been a unilateral failure. She has not been good at her job. She has not been using her resources effectively. Again, her agency is in complete mismanagement. It's falling apart. It's not going well, even if she's somebody that you like and want to see prevail. So this idea that she should be above reproach, or that it's so grotesque, or that she shouldn't have to endure these questions on her track record and answer questions about her job. Anybody who is an employee has to answer questions about their performance and their job. She's not above that because she's a person of color. I find that really insulting and just absolutely, I just thought it was so desperate. When I heard this come across, I had my AirPods in by this time in the hearing. I was kind of doing other stuff and I heard it and I was like, he did not just say that. I rewound it and I'm like, oh my gosh, he sure did. He just came in and tried to call Republicans racist for questioning this woman on her many failures. Yeah, how dare they? This is just is bottom of the barrel. It really is such a bad look. And just like the Fauci hearings did not end up playing very well for Democrats, neither will this one. When you continuously are claiming to be the people who stand for the little guy and who stand up against power and who stand up against oppression, and yet you're running cover for people who are doing a really bad job and taking advantage of people in their positions of power, you look like the hypocrite that you are. And I think long-term, history is not going to be kind to them. Hey guys, Hannah here. Big things are happening at Base Politics, and we want to make sure you stay in the loop with all of our productions and developments. If you like the Base Politics podcast, you can find it every Wednesday morning on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Brad's YouTube. You want to support the show? Be sure to join the Base Politics Locals channel, where you can help produce it for only $5 a month. You can also catch our new shows, Propaganda and Damage Control, every Saturday on our respective YouTubes and Facebook channels. On Damage Control, Brad teams up with right-of-center LGBT guests to restore sanity to the increasingly unhinged debate over these issues. And on Propaganda, I'm taking video footage of police behaving badly every week and using those videos to expose problems within U.S. policing and the laws that guide it. Remember, Base Politics is a nonprofit organization dedicated to moving the culture through content. If you want to be a part of these efforts, you can donate to fund our work at base-politics.com. All right, well, let's move on to our quick hits. We have to turn our attention to an incident that went down at a country music concert. Miranda Lambert, who is actually one of my favorite artists, she was playing a show recently, and she had some beef with her own fans. She stopped the concert to call them out. Let's roll this clip.
Something bound to fall apart. I'm gonna stop right here for a sec, Danny. I'm sorry. These girls are worried about their selfie and not listening to the song. It's pissing me off a little bit. Shall we start again? Hey there, Mr. Timberman.
This is unhinged behavior.
Okay, but while I'm a huge fan of Miranda's music, I have to say Unhinged is kind of her brand. She has like a dagger tattooed on her arm. She literally dumped a salad on a woman's head at a steak restaurant like a year or so ago in Nashville. Like, she's a brawler. I worked in country music. I've been around her, and I think there's a real reason. Like, she's an incredibly talented songwriter. She's never going to get to the heights of somebody like Taylor Swift because she's just kind of a bitch. Like, I mean this behavior
clearly, these customers paid to come see you. You're working for them, and they want a picture to commemorate it, and they can listen and take a photo at the same time. Just stop your whole concert and then attack these people publicly who are your paying loyal fans and humiliate them and have turn a whole crowd against them. You're weaponizing this power dynamic and disparity for something that you just ignore it. A couple people taking a selfie at the concert because they are having fun and they want to commemorate it or share it with their friends. I thought this was crazy. I thought this was wildly disrespectful to her fans. I thought it was entitled. I thought it was bizarre. I think it's a terrible look.
Yeah, it's very much mean girl behavior. And I like I said, I don't think Miranda's by any sense of the imagination like a girl's girl. But it's this kind of thing I often see where people want to like put women down for doing women things. Like, oh, they're taking a selfie with something. They're so stupid. Or like they're taking a picture of their food. How stupid. It just kind of reeked of that to me, of like calling these girls out, trying to make them look stupid, bullying them in front of an entire audience. And also being so self-consumed, so arrogant that you think people need to just be enraptured while you sing and stare at you and do nothing else the whole time. You're a performer. People are paying you for a show. To try to police their behavior when they're not bothering anybody else in the crowd or hurting anybody else's experience is bizarre. I would not give her another dime. If I was these people, I'd want my money back. I mean, that's just so outrageous. I really can't picture most artists ever behaving like this.
And I'll just say this, if she really hates cell phones so much, she could establish a rule at her concert, no phones allowed, right? And like set some parameters from the beginning that this is going to be a cell phone free zone, no selfie, like if you're really that bent out of shape. But you have to set that expectation ahead of time. It is why, and then you could complain if people don't listen and do it anyway. Although that'd still be unreasonable, at least then they had notice. Taking selfies at a concert is a totally normal thing to do. So then to be humiliated and put on the spot by a celebrity superstar is really unfair. It's kind of cruel.
It's counterintuitive to marketing. I mean, it's a good thing if people are seen having fun at your concerts, posting photos of themselves at your concerts. That's just, it makes me think she doesn't really understand like free promotion. I mean, I went to a Matchbox 20 concert the other weekend and I took a ton of selfies. It was so fun. We were excited to be there. I was advertising being there. I was talking about what a fun time I had. Can't imagine if they tried to like call me out and make me look better for the whole audience for simply enjoying the show and taking it in and making memories at it. This looks unhinged on her behalf. And like I said, that is kind of her brand, but this is really a step far because you're attacking your own fans. That's just really beyond the pale.
Not smart.
No, not smart at all. So I won't be going to a Miranda Lambert concert anytime soon. That looks kind of like an oppressive, awful place to be.
All right, let's move on and talk about this just crazy TikTok that's going viral. We both sent it to each other because it's really funny, and unless you take it too seriously, then it's kind of depressing. Take a listen.
So I just got yelled at for asking a very reasonable question. So I'm applying to go somewhere, and I just wanted to know, are there accommodations for people who struggle with time blindness and being on time, you know? And then the person I was with interrupted and acted like I was asking something else, and then when we were done, they actually started yelling at me and saying that accommodations for time blindness doesn't exist, and if you struggle with being on time, you'll never be able to get a job. You know, provided you're trying your absolute best to be there. And then they're like, your stupid generation wants to destroy the workplace. And yeah, I think that a culture where workers are just cut off because they struggle with being on time, when there's other solutions that we can look to, I think that just anybody who thinks it's okay to just treat people like that, yeah, that culture needs to be dismantled. And then I asked that person, how can you feel good about yourself upholding this kind of system? And then to think I'm entitled. No, if people think it's okay to treat others like this, that's entitlement.
Time blindness? That's not a real thing. That my fake alarms are going off.
Time blindness, the things that Gen Z will come up with to excuse their just complete lack of a failure at being a human. Like, you have so many devices. You have more ways of being on time than any other person throughout history has ever had. You can set alarms on your phone. You can set alarms in your house. You can have calendar reminders. I, as a very, 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 very punctual person, really don't understand how people have such a hard time just showing up on time. I think it's a matter of respect to the people who are waiting on you. I think it shows a level of just competence that I would like to be seen with when I go about the world. I mean, I really just, I don't think that this is acceptable at all. You can be on time, you're just lazy and don't want to be.
You know it's not a real thing because if it was a real thing, they would be early just as often as they're late. And I promise you, this person's never early, right?
No.
If they were actually blind to time, which, what does that even mean? But if they actually were, they'd be early just as much as they are late. And we know that's probably not the case. The other thing too, we have technology, like you're saying. How can you be, even if for some reason you were lost track of time easily, and that's what you mean by time blindness, you could easily set an alarm on your phone for half an hour before work. So you know, oh shoot, I've got to change and get in the car and go to work. And you will never forget, right? Like, it's not that hard. I have a million alarms on my phone because I set them whenever I have something important just so I don't forget. It really seems like this is just a complete fabrication and an excuse for you being not on time and not punctual and not serious. And you're like, oh, it's bullying to mistreat me for being late. No, it's not. It's not discrimination. It's evaluation of your choices and behaviors. And those are pretty relevant to being a good employee or a bad employee. So I think it's totally fair for people to hold it against you if you're constantly late to important things. And to try to frame it as some sort of oppression, victim points, new identity just dropped thing is insulting to people with real disabilities. That you're made up woke bullshit. You're now trying to conflate that just because you can't be bothered to set an alarm with actual disabilities. That's offensive. And then also for you to say that people are entitled because they think that you should arrive on time to your job. No, that's not entitled. That's just expecting basic functioning of an adult from a person you're paying. So
when you work a job, people are literally paying you for your time. And so if you are not showing up on time, you are the one that is stealing from them and are entitled to that time that has been purchased from you. You're actually just sloppy. You're disrespectful. You're not going to get anywhere in life. And I am with you. I find it offensive to people who actually do have disabilities who still manage to be on time. I set like 3-4 alarms anytime I have to be somewhere. I have a paranoia about being late or forgetting something. It happened to me one time and I am scarred for life from it. To this day, I have like nightmares about waking up that morning and having forgotten this presentation I was supposed to be at. And it was like, it makes me sick to even think about now. Like, I cannot imagine having that attitude. I think it is completely disrespectful.
Oh my God, imagine if you were explaining to them and you said, sorry, you guys are being entitled by having expected me to be there. I actually suffer from time blindness.
I would have been fired, as I should have been in that moment. Instead, I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, I was like crying, groveling. Everyone's like, you're really overreacting to this. But it's a respect thing. People are expecting you to be somewhere. They're expecting you to get things done. They're waiting on you. Just be cognizant of other people's time. This is literally just being a good human. You know, take the work scenario out of it, period. Like, just telling people you'll be somewhere when you say you're going to be there, because otherwise they're wasting time waiting on you. They're having to accommodate you. It is a completely selfish and just immature way of viewing the world and trying to move around it. And I who coddled you so much in your life that you have the audacity to come on a public platform, advertise that you're a hot mess of a person, and expect to get virtue signal like victim points for it? Something's really going wrong with parents. I mean, the way kids are turning out these days, I'm aghast. Okay, well, let's move on to our hot takes. We're going to skip the mailbag for time this week. Sorry, guys. We'll catch up next week on your comments. But since Brad and I have been traveling, I have a lot of hot takes on hotels. Probably have the next 2 to 3 weeks focus on this subject, actually. I have a lot of things to say. But the first one is, I don't understand how in the year of our Lord 2023, we are still being given irons and ironing boards in hotel rooms. I don't know who knows how to iron. Not me. And I'm actually quite scared of even trying to, because half the time when I do, it burns my clothes. It puts like a mark on my clothes. They get holes in them. You can get steamers for like $30, $40 these days. They're pretty small. Every hotel should move over to steamers. Surely they're less maintenance. I don't understand. They have to be less of a fire hazard, because I feel like I'm going to burn the room down every time I have an iron on. Move to steamers. Stop. Like, just do little things to make the experience nicer. I don't understand.
I love a good steamer.
Yeah, a steamer's great. It's so easy. It's so efficient. They're kind of like idiot-proof. They're easy to use. Irons?
Or hazardous.
Who even taught you how to iron? I've never even seen my mom iron. Like, what?
Yeah, I don't know. That's just one of those things they have in a hotel that no one ever uses, like the Bible.
I tried to use it at Freedom Fest this week, and it was precarious. I didn't burn the dress, but it didn't look great.
So my hot take is about airlines. I was on Delta and I was generally happy with the flight and everything, but they've got to stop shrinking the snack sizes to absurd levels. They came around and they were like, do you want chips? And I was like, sure. And they handed me a thing of Sun Chips that was basically like the size of a package of fruit snacks and had 75% air, and then literally like 4 half-sized Sun Chips and then some crumble. And I'm like, what is the point of this? I'm more hungry having opened this, smelled something, and barely had anything than I was to start with. This isn't like this isn't a service. You actually have just made me worse off by giving me this dainty little air-filled, tiny, bite-sized snack and suggesting to me that it's time to eat, and then giving me a whole bunch of air. So I think it's annoying. Just either give us actual food or don't bother.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And actually, my hack for that, since I got the Delta credit card, is I go to the lounge right before I board a flight and also right after and eat real food, because they have like a full hot bar. So that's my new thing. That way I'm not hungry on flights anymore, because otherwise, yeah, it's just miserable, especially if it's a longer flight.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, that's a wrap. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Leave us a comment. We'll be sure to actually make time for the mailbag next week. And until then, stay based.